So moved. Second, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Same sign. Abstentions, motion carries. At 3 is approved the minutes from the October 19 meeting. Move. Second. Motion on second, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Same sign. Abstentions, motion carries. Item 4 is to vote on the financial statements. Anyone want to say?
Yes, financial subcommittee reviewed the financial statement, everything looked in order and approved it unanimously. No issues.
All right, thanks, Ted. Any questions for Ted? For motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Second, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Abstentions? That motion carries. Item 5 is consent and vote on the contracts and expenses. Bill?
Thank you. There's 2 items here. We'll take them separately, or take them one by one here. The first one is a contract extension with Intrans for our data bike project. We had a $60,000 contract with Intrans, was approved in May of 22. We split the funding for that over the last 2 fiscal years, last year's fiscal year and then this year. So what we're asking you, and it's a $25,000 extension. So we still have $15,000 in this year's budget that we haven't tapped into. So we'd ask the $15,000 to come from that. The other $10,000 that remains, we'd say half of that would come from some software budget that we have. The other $5,000 would come from our unbudgeted reserve funds. So that's the first one. The second one is a request from the partnership to be an investor into the partnership. The previous director had made a verbal commitment to do that, $2,500 a year over 5 years. This is the lowest level for government and nonprofits that they have. However, when we talked to the executive committee, they questioned whether that's worth the commitment to do that, and kind of questioned whether the MPO really gains anything by being an investor, and also pointed out that most of our communities are already investors or funders of the partnership. And I would also note that we've traditionally not been an investor in the partnership. We sponsor the DC trip every year, but we haven't been an investor as a lot of businesses so far. So the executive committee recommended against doing that. So that's why I wanted to make sure we're clear on, there's one recommending for this, one recommending against it. With that said, I'd open it up to any questions, comments before you vote.
So are we gonna need separate motions then for one to approve and one to deny?
I think we get, if there's a motion, say it's recommended by the executive.
I'll make that motion.
There's a motion, a second by Stephanie. Any further discussion on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Abstentions? Great. Item 6 is public comment. On MPO action.
I don't think we.
Then we'll move on to public hearing on the downtown Des Moines dam mitigation and user access point to the access project construction contract.
Thank you. I'll introduce, we have over here on the side our water trails team. So we have a couple items here as we get prepared for the Harriet Street item. So we've got Gabe Snyder, with Stephanie Hopple, who's created new faces in this, the new Icon director, and then Monica Converse, who's been with Icon for a little bit working on the downtown project. So Stephanie, if you want to say anything to the group.
Sure. Just wanted to thank the MPO for all the coordination. The things that we are doing with Icon are so important and valuable to the community, and we couldn't do this without the partnership of the MPO. So thank you for that. Looking forward to all the great and exciting things, and just really value the engagement that we have. So if anybody wants to connect, get hold of me. Dylan has my contact information, or you can find that easily, and I'm happy to have conversations. So just thank you and glad to be here.
Gabe,
Yeah, take it on here there.
yeah, probably there'd be better.
I assume we have no public comments in this public hearing.
Unless everyone's the same.
Gabe Nelson, Senator Associates for the owner rep for Icon Water Trails. So this is for the Harriet Street portion of the project. Originally, when this was all bid originally, this was included in the overall project. We broke out pieces of it, so the Scott Avenue In River was the first contract. We bid the Harriet Street, boat access, separately. That was bid to the Iowa DOT, last month, and had very good results with the project. Engineer's estimate was almost $3.5 million. We had 5 bidders on the project with the low at just over $1.7 million. So had excellent competition and excellent participation in the letting. After you approve the contract, assuming you approve the contract, we would have a pre-construction meeting with the contractor. They don't actually have to get started till next spring, but just with the low river levels and the fact that the low bid, if I didn't say, is Peterson Contractors Inc. This is the same contractor who's doing the city's levy projects right now. So since they're working in the area, we anticipate that maybe they want to start earlier over the winter just because they have crews in the area. So with that, does anyone have questions for me?
Thank you. All right. So we have 2 items for consideration.
Yes.
On the plan specs and form of contract and estimate of costs.
Motion.
Second. And a second, any further discussion on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Abstentions, motion carries. And then on the item 9, vote on the contract for phase 1, the mitigation and user access.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Stephanie, any further discussion on that? All in favor, say aye.
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 Sign. Abstentions, motion carries. All right, thank you. Item 10 is, and thanks for this, it's very cool, so appreciate that. Item 10 is a presentation on the Iowa DOT regional projects update.
Thank you. I'll introduce Shelby Elf with the Iowa DOT. I think this is the first in-person meeting of one of these that you've been to.
No, it's
Maybe a
my
second. Okay.
Yeah.
So Shelby's a new district planner for our district. She's replacing Andy Lumley, who's our district planner for a couple of years. So typically we have this presentation around June timeframe as we get to preparing to approve the TIP. But with all the staff changes, it took a little while before we could get here. So Shelby's here to talk through all the big construction projects we see around the region, which is what we're doing.
Thank you. I am Shelby Eagle. My time at the DOT is about 11 years total, but I've been the district planner for about a month now. I previously worked with program management and the location environment bureau doing info reviews. But I really am going to go over the program, and like Dylan said, normally they would have done this over the summer, but Andy, I think, got to the tech committee and was gone by the time it was kind of presenting you guys, but he did leave his presentation behind that I got to borrow heavily from. So District 1 covers the 12 counties in central Iowa that you see on that screen there, and that's our main district office is in Ames, and then we have some construction offices in Jefferson, Marshalltown, and Grimes. The blue dots are all our maintenance garages, which are primarily located along US 20, US 30, and I-80. Sometimes we also work on projects in Dallas County, which is actually District 4, or Warren County and District 5, but when they're part of the Des Moines Metro, it kind of makes more sense for District 1 to handle them. As the district planner, my boundaries are a little different, just to make sure I'm matching up and covering the whole planning agency. So you'll see I actually cover 18 and the gray one in the middle, and then those red lines are the district boundaries. But that way you guys don't have to work with 3 district planners, you only have the one. This is, my formatting got off a little. So this was one slide I had to change from when Andy did the presentation. I think 4 of the names were different or in different places. Allison Smythe, she used to be the assistant district engineer, now she is the district engineer. Jeremy Borthers. He's been at the DOT for probably at least 20 years, but he started 2 or 3 weeks ago as the new assistant district engineer. That's some of the key staff that would probably work with the MPO. Here's all the projects in the 5-year DOT program. There's not showing up as good as I had hoped. Sorry about that, but the blue lines are highway projects and the maroon reddish colored dots are like bridge projects. It might look like we're redoing all of 235 and 3580, but there's actually signage and landscaping on those, so it's not like heavy construction projects. Start off first with our ongoing projects. This one is the Northeast Mix Master, and work has already started on that as of 2022. We have about $90 million already awarded with another 27 million programmed in the next 2 years, this year and next year. Yeah, the red lines are bridges, the yellow lines are new pavement or paved roadways. But we still have some money to spend on grading and paving as well as lighting and traffic signs. Next project. Well, this is actually the same project, but this is our ultimate design that we are looking at eventually constructing, but it's not all programmed at this point. Next project is our I-35 from Ankeny to Huxley, the 6-lane, going from 4 to 6 lanes there. The Elkhart interchange is currently under construction, and that's what you see in the picture here. And then once that's completed and open, we'll start work on the Huxley Iowa 210 interchange that's north of this one. We already have awarded about $60 million with another 104 over the next, well, 4 years, although we don't have any money programmed for 25, so, but between this year and fiscal year 27. And then this, I don't know how well it's gonna show up, but that is the alignment that'll be constructed with the 6-lane facility. So for upcoming projects, this is the one we were just looking at, the 6-lane, but we're only going a little north of that 210 interchange. Then we'll skip up north to County Road E57 to about US 30. And you can see all the amounts there, but we're gonna skip that middle part. That'll come at the end. We don't know exactly how long that northern part will take. It'll probably be 28, 29, maybe even fiscal year 30. And then once that's completed, we'll start programming, but we only program 5 years out. So that red portion is not programmed right now. This one is another one of our upcoming projects. It's from the Northeast Mix Master over to US 65 on 80. This is a capacity improvement project, and it will start in fiscal year 25. We'll actually purchase a little bit of right of way this year, but the construction will start next year and go through 2027 with a little bit of work still in 28. But you'll see the bulk of it in years 26 and 27. This project is actually north, is to your right here. This is the Hickman Road interchange on 3580. And we're putting in a new diverging diamond interchange there. We do have some right-of-way money we'll be using this year, but construction won't start till next year, and that'll be some bridge mostly bridge work with some grading and paving as well. And that should last a couple of years until fiscal year 28 is the last year of that project. The next one up is the Southwest Mix Master. And it's programmed in 27 to 2029, about $79 million. The bulk of it is in 2027. And that money is mostly this new bridge that is shown in the purple there. But they're moving, we're moving the main line, this will come out of it all. And now when you go this way, it'll be inside because most of this traffic is on the Jordan Creek. And most of this traffic wants to keep going west. So it's been a problem up until now that we think this will help alleviate all the crisscrossing that happens there. The next one is Iowa 141. There's actually going to be several projects in this corridor over the next decade probably, but this one is at 121st Street. And they'll be closing 121st. Well, closing some of it, and then building this new connector road over to Iowa 415 so that people can get on at that interchange instead of trying to cross the traffic there. My last one I've got here is US 69 right here in Des Moines. We're gonna be replacing the bridge, and that's in 2027. And then we're also working right now on our design to redo the Maury Street and 69 or 14th Street intersection. There's also, it's probably gonna have, I don't know if I'm letting the cat out of the bag, but there's gonna be a new connection from Martin Luther King that'll come down through here and connect. But we're still working with the city on what exactly that's going to look like. But those projects will be happening at the same time, although likely by two different contractors, a bridge one and a roadway one.
And what year?
That's in 27. The bridge is in 2025 for the, I think that's gonna be a little later. I don't think it's gonna be in 25. But that might be what's currently programmed for, so that's what that's going. And that's all I've got. Any questions on anything I didn't go over, any projects?
So you mentioned the Hickman at 3580 interchange.
Yeah,
What's the timing for University Avenue just south of that 3580 interchange? Any idea?
well,
Hopefully it's gonna be after
University-
Hickman is done.
so university, oh, too far. We're not doing anything well, we're doing a little work, I guess, at the interchange, but we are being careful about that. It's gonna run into kind of the Southwest Mix Master. So we'll make sure this one's done before that starts, so that there's not too many closures in that area. Ones in the conflicting detour routes that send you on a road that's closed. So we are aware of that, and they're working to make sure they don't overlap and cause too many issues at the same time.
So you're thinking 29 at the earliest?
No, that it's sooner than that. Hickman is,
Well, Hickman's 25 and 28, right?
yeah. And this was mix was 27 to 29. Now the 28, mostly all that we'll be doing is erosion control, that kind of stuff. The roadway should all be open by that point. And same with, the Southwest Mixed Master. A lot of time our first year that we say is to buy right of way. That's what the first year is usually programmed for, so the actual construction part of that should be offset enough not to problems there.
Any questions, Michelle? All right, thank you, Shelley.
Thanks.
All right, moving on then, so we're going on the calendar year 2024 meeting date.
Thank you. We have the meeting dates for you. They're in the packet. I don't appear on the screen. Typical schedule like we usually do, third Thursday or however it shakes out, the second Thursday after the exec meeting, type of thing. One thing I will point out is that the September meeting, we pushed that back a week because it overlaps, this year it overlapped with the League of Cities Conference. A lot of you couldn't make it, so we pushed it back a week just to avoid that next year too. So we can always put that back. If that's not an issue for people, we thought that just easier to do that this year. Otherwise, please stand and thank for it.
Any questions on that? There motion?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Someone raising his hand online, Mark's now.
Okay, Mark?
Yeah, I had a question, but if the county or if the engineer's still there, I was gonna ask her about the planning for the I-35 going south in Warren County and what was the timeline for all that? Because it was listed in as one of the projects, but she really didn't mention it in her detail.
Oh, it was on that map.
Yes, it was.
All that, yeah, I'd have to look that up real quick.
Why don't we move on and then
Yeah.
if you have a minute to do that, we'll move on to our agenda. So I believe we took the vote on that, right? That motion carries on the dates. We'll move to item 12 on the executive director search. The executive director search committee met earlier this month. We had sent out our RFPs to 3 search consultants. After reviewing that, the search committee had made a determination that we would recommend to the policy committee to do an internally managed process rather than to hire any of those, primarily on the interest of saving some money. We didn't feel that with what was quoted for each of the consultants that there was consensus that it was something we think we could do internally and not use additional funds of the NMPO to do that. So the recommendation then is that you see set forth in your packet. Largely, we will open this up for posting starting tomorrow through December 1, and then the process for receiving those applications, and bringing a final recommendation, hopefully to this committee for the January 18. So with that, be happy to answer any questions or I know some folks have comments. Mark, if you want to leave your comments now, I usually give us some comments.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Lynn Murray is our primary representative. He's unable to be here tonight. So my name is Mark Conrad. And from my understanding, this wouldn't be an MPO meeting without Pleasant Hill talking. So we're going to keep that. I believe there's some frustration with the amount of time taken to get to this point, 5 to 6 months. And now it appears we're trying to rush through the last phase of this process. No offense to anyone, but we question this process if it's been transparent. There's a lot of different conversations and activities with all the members of the MPO. Everyone's heard bits and pieces of what has been going on behind the scenes, which is concerning. It's been mentioned that has focused on 2 candidates for the job without doing the necessary due diligence to establish a fair and just process and let the process take us towards the most qualified candidates for the job, wherever they may come from. If we recall correctly, this was a unanimous vote by this group to go a different direction with a new executive director. We've invested a lot of government money and effort, over $200,000 in reserve funds, to remove the previous director, to reestablish legitimate financial reporting, to amend the policies and procedures manual, the employee handbook, and to review and make changes over the course of the year to address serious issues with annual financial audits. To be transparent, have an independent process, wouldn't it make sense to hire a consultant to help find the most qualified applicant or applicants for the executive director of this group and to take the MPO to the next level? None of our organizations that we represent would follow these steps outlined for the selection of an executive director, to hire a department director, city, county manager, but here we are. From my understanding that this job is going to be posted this Friday with a due date of Friday, December 21st, which is a period of 15 days over the Thanksgiving holiday. Extremely short time to get the word out and allow applicants time to consider the position and submit a response. We don't know what's contained in this job posting. What does this group really desire in a candidate to take us to the next level? Obviously, we know we need a planner. We need someone that can manage staff. We also probably need somebody that can manage federal funds because those items are hard to manage. We also want to know, has any consideration been given to posting this with ISU or University of Iowa, where we have training programs that likely have an alumni association in connections with planners that may be interested in this position. We also understand the office manager will receive the applications and may do the initial review based on the timeliness of the submissions. Will she have any other role in the process, such as a preliminary screening, or has any criteria been provided to her? Will there be any background work done with review of candidates' references, internet searches, etc.? Will we need waivers signed by the applicants so we can do a criminal history, driver's license, or credit check? We go through a lot of money here. We'd like to see the scoring sheet to understand what attributes will be scored and what attributes are the most valued based on the assigned percentages of the overall score. Who's going to prepare the interview questions and who will review them to make sure they are appropriate and legally acceptable to ask? These questions need to be consistent and fair to avoid any litigation that may arise. During the interviews, will a facilitator be used to ask the questions to ensure each candidate receives the same phrase questions? Can we use an HR staff member from any of our member cities? Has the policy committee approved this? At what point will the policy committee have an opportunity to meet the finalists? What about the ability does the policy committee have in the final selection process? Policy committee does not meet December. We would not convene until mid-2024. To be recommended a special meeting relative to meeting the executive director finalists and the possibility for calling a closed discussion to discuss both the review of the qualifications and the finalists and the final selection process. It's extremely imperative that we protect our current staff at the MPO. We need to provide them support and distance for MPO staff during all phases of this hiring process. And finally, once candidates are ranked and the best qualified candidates chosen, who's going to do the contract negotiations? Will we use the MPO attorney? What if we can't come to an agreement with this person? We move on to the next ranked candidate. I thank everyone for listening about our concerns. We want this group to be the best it's ever been, whoever it is.
I will respond to some of those comments. I think certainly anybody else is on the search committee. So again, we will have the application starting tomorrow. Yes, it has been a long time since we've had this whole thing. But I think the fact that there's a vacancy at the MPO is well known in the area. I don't think we're rushing at this point. I think, from my perspective, it's time to get into a process to get a decision made. I think we will have well qualified candidates. Search committee, is comprised of a number of folks from the policy committee. We'll do that initial review, and this has been as transparent as it can be. Also respecting folks' privacy that applies to this thing. So I think the goal of anybody at this point, certainly of everyone on the search committee, is to find the most qualified person for this job. That's a universal thing. So I don't think there's any disagreement on how that's to be done. And we'll any further comments on it. Mark, I appreciate your comments, but I think we will meet a lot of those questions as we move along the process. So,
Just that Mayor Clark has raised your hand.
okay, Mayor Clark, did you want to say something?
I do, thank you. I missed the part. It was hard to hear you when you were talking about why the search committee felt like an internal search was most important. Can you restate that, please?
The search committee felt that it was best after reviewing the responses on the RFPs that we just do this internally, primarily for cost. We felt that it was largely between $30,000 and $40,000, as I recall, for the goals with our service.
High end was 40.
Yeah.
I would respectfully disagree with that recommendation. I agree with a lot of the comments that were just made relative to needs for this to be professionally managed and transparent process. And good search firms do cost money, but they're usually, or at least most of the time, worth it. I would also just state that I'm not sure the process to date has been a very smooth one. And going forward, I don't know that there's a lot of confidence from the policy committee that that can be effectively changed within the next month. So if I would respectfully disagree that an internal search is the best way to go.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
along with Mayor Clark's comments, I mean, we just hired our city administrator in Windsor Heights three months ago. We used GovHR to do that. I mean, for our city of 5,000 people, it's $20,000, something like that. I mean, search firm costs money, but we are, and we ended up getting someone local, but we were very satisfied with the work they did. So I understand the concerns about, I guess, cost saving, because that's a lot of money, but it's worth it, I think, in the end. So that's just my opinion. I think that amount of money is worth it to bring in someone independently for finding a quality candidate.
Okay. Any other comments?
Yes, this is Mark from Warren County. I would tend to concur with the comments that have just been expressed. I think the openness and transparency is very, very important. While it might cost some additional dollars, I think it's very important to reassure everybody involved that this is an above the board professional process that's being done.
Gunnar, is there someone else?
No, I was just going to thank you. He raised his hand.
Well, yeah, but let's just put it this way, if I've been hearing that's maybe, where one of sometimes I haven't heard any comments to the contrary. If that's the case, we can certainly take it back and make a recommendation for the January meeting. That would delay the process, but we understand that. But come back and make a recommendation for the hiring of one of the search firms. That's the old policy.
Would that require a motion?
Probably best if we have a motion to that effect, and then to direct the search committee to come back with a recommendation for consultant to help with the process. Motion by Stephanie.
I'll second the motion.
Mr. Chairman, this is Tom Hawk, Metropolitan County. I just want to make sure I'm not hearing all this stuff extremely well. And as you know, I was on the committee, the search committee, and I was late for that meeting that the committee decided to do an internal search. I didn't have a strong inclination one way or another. I think that, having a search and putting some names on it out are good, and people that have a strong background in the job that I'm in. We have done it. We've hired people both ways. We've hired department directors internally that we knew performed extremely well. We knew their background. We hired them internally, and we've hired a county administrator that way. But then we've also done the search piece. So I've been involved in it both ways. I think the point we're getting here too is that there was a recommendation made, and you've had 4 or 5 people that expressed interest in hiring a search firm and spending transportation dollars that were intended to be spent on road projects for a search firm that frankly I'm not sure that we need. This I think people get carried away here with how important they believe that replacing someone based on an out-of-town search firm or even a statewide search firm is relevant. But I can go with whatever the committee decides, but the recommendation that was made was the recommendation that was made. I don't know that you have verbal comments from 3 or 4 policy committee members. If that's okay, if that's how the vote goes, we're good with that. But I don't know that you change the item on the agenda based on a few comments from policy committee members.
Well, Tom, I appreciate your comments. Right now, we do have a motion and a second to that effect, so.
Yeah, I think Mayor Clark raised your hand again.
Okay, Courtney, do you have further comments?
I was just going to say that there are, I guess, 2 different topics. If you were actually looking at hiring internally, that's a different conversation for an internal search discussion. But when you're not looking at just that process, when you're looking at a broader process, I think the external search firm has merit. I think we haven't obviously been privy to these conversations, but we're not getting a lot of feedback from the search committee to make any other choice here. So that was all I was going to mention.
Any further comments?
With the motion restated, it looks like David Jones is asking for the motion to be restated.
Tom, what did you say? I'm sorry, I was talking to Dylan.
Well, I just saw a chat from David Jones from Ankeny asking that the motion be restated.
Stephanie, you want to restate your motion? I believe.
To move forward with the engagement of a consultant to lead the search for the new executive director.
Have the search committee come back with a recommendation for that. Right?
Yes, yes.
So that was the motion, Tom.
Thank you.
And there's a possibility we could call for a December special meeting on this, so we can move this forward, not waiting on the vote too. So we may be calling a special meeting of the policy committee in December for this consideration. So, with that, any further discussion? Call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Abstentions. We're gonna ask for a roll call vote on this.
Mayor Holm from Ankeny.
Yes.
Yes to, how do you want to do this? Yes.
Well, it's yes to the motion, correct?
Yes to the motion.
Correct. I was on the search committee, but if the bulk of the committee wants to go this way, I'm fine with going. Although I share the same concerns that Supervisor Hawkinsmith has. There's nothing wrong with more transparency and going with the committee.
David Jones, Ankeny.
Yes.
5, Ted Weaver.
Yes.
Dallas County, Mark Hansen.
No.
Dark, Luis Montoya.
Yes.
City of Des Moines, Mayor County.
Yes.
City of Des Moines, Carl Voss.
No.
City of Norwalk, Stephanie Reba. Yes.
I'm assuming for comments.
You're Connie, okay, sorry.
Yes.
Okay. Connie, yes. Pleasant Hill, Mark Conrad.
Yes.
Polk City, Jeff Walters.
No.
Tom Hawkins, Smith, Polk County.
No.
Mary Ann Wade, Rivendell.
Yes.
Warren County, Mark Snell.
No,
City of Waukee, Mayor Clark.
Yes.
City of West Des Moines, Jamie Ledsbrug.
Yes.
Windsor Heights, Mike Jones.
Yes.
I have all voting members. The noes have 5, yeses have 12.
All right,
Yes,
so
it's happened.
that motion carries. I will reconvene the search committee, we call a meeting for that, and then come back and stay tuned. We may be calling a special meeting in December to bring us back to policy. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for your input. Okay, we'll move on then to item 13, and that is the report vote on the planning manager remote work agreement.
Thank you. For those who are unaware, our planning manager, Zach Young, has been working fully remote for the last almost 2 years now. I think February 22 is when that started. He had an existing agreement with the previous director that came up with through the end of 22, that was then extended to the end of 23. So now as we approach the end of calendar year 2023, there's a discussion of what do we do now? We discussed the possibility of extending that contract with the executive committee last week. Their recommendation was, instead of extending it as an employment agreement, making it into a consulting agreement essentially. This would ensure that we're still in compliance with our remote work policy, which says there has to be at least 3 days in the office each week. That way there's fairness to the rest of the staff and everything. It still allows the planning manager, Zach, to work on the existing projects. I would note that Zach's involved with a lot of critical things, including our long-range transportation plan, our surface transportation block grant funding, which is starting up here pretty soon, managing the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant that we have, and a number of other things that are pretty critical to us. So to just cut that off at the end of the calendar year would be pretty detrimental, especially when we're a little short-staffed at the moment. So what, go to the next slide, what executive committee basically outlined was for Zach and I and Scott to work on a framework for how this could go forward. In discussing that framework, basically what we're proposing is that we would take Zach's current salary benefits, convert that into an hourly rate with a not to exceed amount. So that way it's pretty budget neutral in terms of what we would have been paying if he was still a staff member. He would be paid as a consultant, allow some allowances for traveling to Des Moines once a month, for lodging and mileage and so forth. And then identify those specific projects that he's working on and the activities that we would expect from that. If everyone's comfortable with that framework, what we'd ask for you today is to allow us to then hammer out the actual verbiage of the contract for us to sign that before the end of 2023. The reason we're bringing this for you now is because policy does not meet the next one. So this will be the last chance for the policy committee to have a say in this and either extend the contract or do this consulting agreement. So again, what we're asking is that if you're comfortable with that framework, give us the approval to then put together that contract, get that signed, so it can be executed at the end of this calendar year. If there's questions about that, happy to address those.
And this may be a question for executive committee, but how do you see the time frame and the term of this contract? What are the triggers? Is it getting a director hired and allowing them to make some decisions on this position? When would you be replacing it with a staff that's?
So pretty much.
Well, I don't know, maybe that is for the exec.
Well, I don't know if there's been, I think we've been reserving that more until the permanent executive director hires. That was really good. But we did, but given that, we do have some critical dates coming up that, Zach has been very valuable in working on this thing. And obviously, that's, his services have been extremely valuable, so.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's just I'm looking for an end game here of how would you even put a term to this? Is it just as needed for month to month or?
I think that's really what we're looking at, is,
Okay.
you know, and, you know, with due respect to Zach too, he has some things he needs to look at too, and, so it's a two-way street, and, you know, if Zach says he needs to move on to it, and we understand that, given that, but I think the relationship right now is that we'll like to work with each other, and again, the services that he provides are very valuable, you know.
And what we talked about in exec was that, having the new director have some say in this, but also that the major projects that he's working on, in theory, can take him through the end of next year. And so we might need some time, you know, to be able to transition off that and use this period as a means for him to transition. But again, allowing that new director to have some influence on that as well.
That's helpful. One, exactly what Ted said, once the new director is hired, to get together with Zach and put together a transition plan. We can't really put that together until we know what the staffing situation looks like, because that director is the kind of domino that triggers a lot of other things. So once that happens, we'll better be able to do that transition plan. Until then, this is really the solution to get us through the end of this year and starting into next year.
I understand Zach is valuable and he does a great job. Can we get a full scope of work on what you expect out of him for this? And then, can there be an end date on the contract with the option to renewal like we do with other contractors? So that by then we'd have a new executive director sometime. And if that for some reason something got delayed, we could extend it as long as both parties agree to it. Come back. That way everyone's protected.
Yeah, and we can, I mean, I'm happy to share, and Zach, we can share what Zach's working on now and what we would expect for that. That would be in the contract, if you put that together. I guess I'm curious what everyone thinks is, in terms of the due date, or in terms of the termination date. What we have been thinking, and kind of the way the contract now just says it's allowed up through the end of 2023, we're thinking just extend that to say up through the end of 2024. If we need to make that more of a month-to-month type of thing though, or, you know, something else, that's something we would need to know, and I want to make sure everybody's comfortable with what's in there, and also to make sure Zach's comfortable with that too.
I wouldn't want to see month to month. That's too much. I think it should be longer than that.
Just to the end of 24, is that too long? Knowing that there would be a option that either party could terminate that at any time, just like any other contract. But that would be like, not up to people.
It'd be an hourly rate, right?
Right, yes. So essentially, I mean, it is, I think up to the end of 24, I think it's reasonable, especially given the
long-range transportation plan that we've discussed is due next November, so that's one of his key things. That alone would take it almost a year.
So I need a motion? Yes.
I'm gonna move it, Polk County.
Carl, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Both same sign. Abstentions? All right, that motion carries. Item 14, report and vote on the decision making tree.
Thank you. We've discussed this over the last couple of months, is this idea of having a decision-making tree to help the MPO, the board, and staff understand and have clarity around which projects we get involved with and what projects we're involved with that. This would identify which projects the MPO is leading, which ones we're simply supporting, and which ones are a little more supplemental or kind of a one-off type of thing, and also just which ones we shouldn't be involved with at all. On the next page, and also in your agenda packet, is what that actual decision flow chart looks like. I won't go through all of this in detail. You've seen it before, it's in the packet. But essentially it just asks, is this transportation related? If yes, that kind of goes to second path to which level of involvement. If no, then there's got to be a lot of things that break the right way for the MPO to get involved, including that there's nobody else to do it, that we all agree that this is something that's important to the region, and so on and so forth. So with that, we ask for your approval of this. Once this is approved, if it's approved, we would start using this early next year when we put together an annual work program, and we do a long-range plan, and some other critical pieces that we're coming up recently as far as what we're going to be involved with.
Approval. Second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Sign, abstention, motion carries. And again, I think it's, we talked about this at length with the executive committee, I think, lots of putting this together, I think, decision making tree for us to move forward. So, all right, item 15, the report on the NPO representative selection process. So,
Thank you. Just want to walk through real quick the selection process for next calendar year. At the end of the year, or at the beginning of next year, this is when all communities select their representatives to the MPO. So we just want to give a reminder of how this works, because we're a little unique, especially with our executive committee, how that's put together. It really depends on which size community you are. Communities under 50,000 will appoint their representatives to both the technical and the policy committee. When it comes to the executive committee, all of those committees belong to one of three sub areas. The mayors of those sub areas get together, pick their two representatives from among those 5 members to then represent them on policy, on the executive committee. Communities over 50,000 and Polk County are a little different. They get automatic representation on the EPO, so basically you just pick your executive policy members, and then for the city of Des Moines, you need to decide which of your 5 serve on the, which two of your 5 serve on the committee. Same thing with West Des Moines and Ankeny, which one of your 2 serve on the executive committee, but otherwise it's pretty straightforward. What we'll be doing probably tomorrow, now that we have our calendar set, and we'll include that in the packet, we'll send it out to all the city clerks and the county auditors and make sure that gets on the agendas for early next year, whenever you do your appointments for the committees. And that way everything kind of falls in line with the due dates that we need to hit. The first meeting where all of the new representatives will probably be in January as far as the policy and technical cleanups. And then it's February for those sub areas to get together, decide who's going to serve on them. Then in March, we will have the election, or in February, we'll have the election of officers, and new officers will take over in March. Now that's a little convoluted, and that kind of leads to another item we'll talk about later, potentially looking at that process and seeing if there's a better way to do it. For right now, that's what our bylaws say, so that's what we follow.
thanks, Bill. Any questions for Bill on that? All right, item 16 is report on the planning area boundaries. Zach.
Thank you. As you're aware, staff has been updating our long-range transportation plan. Typically, in conjunction with that, we will update our planning area boundary. We're required to do this. It has to include our urban area boundary, which we approved a few months ago. So we've been reviewing member governments, future land use maps, comprehensive plans to determine what areas we might need to adjust our planning area boundary. On the next slide here, we've got a map that shows our existing planning area boundary, which is in the black line. And then in the red dotted line is what we're proposing for potential changes. So while we were looking at those comprehensive plans, we noticed there were a couple areas that we felt like we needed to make adjustments here. One of them was in the south around Carlisle and Norwalk. Both of those communities have areas in their comp plans that go out of our existing boundary. So we bumped it out down there to capture those areas. And then also over in around Waukee, the issue we ran into there is that Adel, their city limits are bumping into our current existing planning area. And so we need to kind of drop that in a little bit there so that Odell is not in our planning area. I think the next slide here, we've got an issue that Dylan wants to touch on.
Yeah, I can bring this up as it relates to our planning area. We discussed this with the executive committee, and some others of you might be aware of this, but we've had a contract with SERPA, which is the planning area outside of the MPO, and you can see it on the map, that area in green. SERPA is a contract we've had since 1994 when SERPA started. SERPA earlier today voted to explore a contract with MIPA instead of the MPO. And this would happen once MIPA moves away from the MPO. Just a reminder, everybody, when we approved this year's budget, there was an agreement that we would let MIPA contract with the MPO for 1 more year. And during that time, they need to find their own home, a new home, or stand on their own, or what have you. A lot of those SERPA members, or MIPA members, are also SERPA members, and they kind of wanted to make sure that those two are aligned. So when MIPA leaves, SERPA will most likely go with them. Now, what that means for our planning area boundary is that as Polk County is not a member of MIPA anymore and might not want to go with them, there's potential that all of Polk County would come into the MPO's planning area boundary. This kind of feels like conference realignment in football or anything, right? So what we have here on the screen is what that would look like, essentially, you just draw that dotted line, send it out to all of Polk County. This is something that we've discussed with the county, and I don't want to say that's a done deal by any means. I just want to let you know that that conversation is happening, and we'll continue to talk with the county about this. Supervisor Hawkins, feel free to jump in if you want to, but that's something that's a potential that by the time this is approved, this might have become more of a reality.
Yeah, Dylan, I think there's some positives to the idea. Number one, expanding that boundary for us, for Polk County, adding into some of those unincorporated areas that are adjacent to the urban areas where, bridge replacements and what have you. I understand there's some issues about budgeting. I think the county loses out on some funding, not a ton, but I know you're talking with our county administrator about that, and we can. I think long term, it's probably the best plan, but we'll see when we get all the details.
So right now, all of this, as far as the planning area is draft. We're taking comments, so I'll turn it back over to Zach to talk through the rest of the process and what that looks like.
Yeah, so we presented this to tech, we're taking comments till November 27th, and then we'll bring it back at a future meeting for approval. We will make adjustments to it if we receive any comments that from any of our other member governments that want to see us make any other adjustments to it. But we will bring it back at a future meeting for approval.
Any further comments on that? Thanks, Zach. And then moving on then would be to item 17, which is Mobilize Tomorrow.
Thank you. Wanted to provide you with an update on where we're at with our update to Mobilize Tomorrow. There are a number of things that we want to touch on today, listed on the screen there. Mostly focus on funding projections that staff has worked out, but also briefly touch on some of the upcoming things like the growth scenario, project solicitation, and then also want to have a brief discussion about the carbon reduction program funding, which we discussed last month. So go to the next slide there. Getting into the funding projections, there's been some new federal guidance on this. In the past, we were required to do fiscal constraint on the entire length of our long-range plan. Now they're only requiring us to look at fiscal constraint for the first 10 years of the long-range plan. So we based our funding projections on that first 10-year period. It'll be 2025 through 2034. And the funding programs we looked at were several things. We looked at federal sources, which for us include the STBG funding, the TAP funding, and then the carbon reduction program funding. On the state side, we looked at road use tax funds, and then from a local perspective, we were looking at property taxes and bonds and things of that nature. As far as the growth rates go, staff looked at historical data on all of these different funding sources and came up with the proposed growth rates on the screen there for you. So for STBG and TAP, we're proposing a 2.5% annual growth rate. On the carbon reduction funding, a 0.5% growth rate, 2.5% for road use tax fund, and then a 0% growth rate for our local funding. That really came out of a recommendation that we got from the finance subcommittee last time we went through this process. They felt like just everything that's going on at the state, they wanted to take a very conservative approach to the local funding. So that's why we're not having a growth rate on that. A couple things I would note, we did present all of these growth rates to the finance subcommittee. They approved them. They felt like these were in line with what we should be looking at. We do not, on these projections, we do a straight line projection. So we take these growth rates, determine an annual funding amount increase, and then add that on each year. And on the screen there now, before you can see what those projections look like. If you look at the total there, we're looking at having somewhere a little over $2.5 billion available in revenue for transportation projects. I would note that historically, when we look at the data for local funding, only about 40% of the local funding that's spent on transportation is actually spent on construction projects. So we did account for that, and we did subtract the 60% that's spent on other things like maintenance, debt service, things of that nature. We did take that off the top of that number just to have a conservative amount that we're looking at. Typically, the DOT likes us to go a little more on the conservative side when we're making these projections. I think that may be my last slide. Nope, next steps. We will be bringing these funding projections back at the December meeting for approval. We do have yet to work with the Iowa DOT and DART on developing projections for those two agencies. But we did want to get the projections for the funding that the MPO has control over in front of you now. And barring comments, we'll bring this back at the next month's meeting for approval. Happy to take any questions you have about that before I touch on a few other things with the long range plan.
Mr. Chairman, I got a quick question for Zach. Zach, this is Tom Hawksmith. Who's going to do our growth scenario projections for the LRTP? Do we have somebody that's doing that now?
We're currently working on that. One of the next things I'm going to touch on is that it's just something that we typically do internally as a staff. And we've started that process.
Oh, you guys are doing it internally now?
We have always done that process internally.
So the last LRTP committee that I was on, way back when Scott Searcine was still there, they had someone that gathered the growth scenario data for us. It seemed like to me, but I'll talk to you about it another time. Doesn't matter. I was just curious.
I'll correct myself. We've always done it internally since I've been here. So that was before. That was before my time.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. I go back way too far. Sorry.
Thanks. All right, moving on then.
I just had a couple of quick things on the LRTP. We have begun the process of looking at the growth scenario for developing housing and employment projections and also finalizing our transportation analysis zones, our TAZs. Our plan is to distribute those final TAZs along with housing and employment projection numbers to each member government so that they can allocate that growth across the region where they feel like it's going to be going over that 10-year period that we'll be looking at. As far as project solicitation goes, that's another thing that will be coming up in the next couple of months. We'll be sending out a Google form to all of our member governments so that they can submit their projects for that first 10-year period of the plan. So projects between 2025 and 2034. And I think the last thing I have on the next slide is just a quick update on the carbon reduction funding. As we discussed last month, executive policy wanted us to hold off on actually awarding those funds until we could have a discussion on the long range plan, think a little bit more strategically about how we might spend that money. We received a little bit more clarity from the Iowa DOT. They really want to see those funds programmed in the 25 to 29 TIP. They did say that we can amend those CRP funds into the TIP late next year. If possible, so that would still give us time to kind of go through some strategic thinking about how we want to spend those funds. So as long as that's still the direction the committee wants to go, that's what staff would recommend, is that as part of the LRTP, we think about how we want to spend those funds and then amend projects into the TIP at the end of next year. I think that's it. Happy to take any questions you have about those items.
Thank you, Zach. Any questions for Zach on those?
Just go ahead. So if I understand, with the CRP funds, it has to be a standalone process. It will line up with our other STBG.
It would not line up this time. I think our proposal would be that any future rounds that funding should line up with the STBG process. But if we do want to think about them strategically, like was discussed at last month's meeting, we would have to do a standalone process, probably sometime in the middle of next year, to be able to amend the TIP at the end of the year.
I think that's actually a good idea.
All right, thanks, Zach. And then we'll still have the floor for the next item, which is the STBG program.
Yeah, just a real quick update to let you know that we are going to be posting applications for the 2028 STBG cycle on December 1st. They'll be posted on our website. As we have always done in the past, those will be online applications. They'll be due back to the MPO by January 5th. We will be starting very quickly to start the process to schedule when those applicant presentations will be, but they will be sometime in late February or early March of next year. I would note that staff is also reviewing the program guidelines for the TAP program based on some changes that have been made by the Iowa DOT over the past year. The TAP process will follow the same schedule as STBG, and we will be awarding out 2 years of TAP funding since no funds were awarded last year based on the changes that the Iowa DOT was making. So just want to make you aware of the schedule that's coming up on that. I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions on that? Thank you, Zach.
Thank you.
Item 19, director report, Joel.
Thank you. Quick update on this. We've been going around meeting with all the city councils, doing presentations to council supervisors. We've gone through a third of those. We've already completed about a third of those. We've scheduled the next third. We still are waiting to schedule the final third. So we're in the process of that. Look forward to seeing us in your community sometime pretty soon. Next item, we've shared this with you in the past, three key recommendations following taking several months of working to meet with all the committee members one-on-one.